Is everything okay?
Yeah. Go be with your family.
You sure?
Yeah, go.
I think I need to open this video by getting the obligatory, hey, that's the name of the show out of the way. And with that done, man, a lot happened in this episode. Perhaps too much, which is why I don't think the 6-episode miniseries is the ideal way to structure a TV show. But that's how many episodes we're getting, and that means with episode 4 behind us, we're heading into the final stretch. You can feel the transition all over the beginning of this one. Things are in motion, and the dynamics of the case are changing. The bodies from Tsalal are being taken away, no more corpsicle, and while Conley says he's not there to take the case as well, just as you don't get an actor of this caliber to play a minor side character, there has to be a reason he's there, and he's probably trying to take the case away, because one thing this episode did really well was showcase how messed up everyone involved with it in Ennis actually is. It's a holiday which has a particular way of shining a light on this, which you see after Evangeline starts a fight that seemed to be as much about taking a beating as giving one out. She tells Kavik through a bloodied mouth, these characters are all alone. Not literally, except for Rose, who seems to take to the quiet life, if only it weren't for all the pesky dead, but alone in the sense that they won't let anyone in. We've seen it in the flashbacks, but Connolly confirms that for Liz, this got a lot worse after she lost Jake and Holden. That led to her exile to Ennis, and we see that even at the end of the world, she can't get away from her loss. Navarro finds herself in a similar situation with the loss of Julia in this episode, and we come out of it with a better understanding of what she believes. Essentially, she worries that her family's cursed. Something calls to them, and they follow. And last week I thought they would use her fear of it being chalked up to mental illness, something that was stated explicitly in her first conversation with Rose. And this week she finds herself in the same place as us, because it's pretty hard to explain everything without some supernatural influence. It came off like she was asking Rose about talking to the dead because of what was going on with Julia, but now we see it's more about the connection she has herself. The thing that she can't get away from is getting louder. And now that the one thing that grounded her is gone, we're ready to see where this is all headed. Like last week, some things worked better in this episode than others for me. For example, it never seemed likely that Hank's fiancée would turn out to be real, but talk about bad Christmas Eves. I never would have guessed that this kind of scene with Hank, a character I don't really care that much about, could deliver such an emotional blow. The flight attendant fake out, and then walking into the room and seeing the rose petals on the camo bed. That really says a lot. That stuff all still works really well. The first time I watched the episode, though, a lot of this stuff just flew right by, which goes back to what I said about the 6-episode structure. And the closing sequence wasn't my favorite thing that they've done. But at the same time, we did get some major developments in the case. Of course, in the last episode, they discovered the video, and he did appear to be in ice caves. And we find out from Navarro that there aren't any near where she died, which means that her body was moved after she was murdered. And this seems like something that was done to make a statement, a threat to the other protesters. Pete was also tasked with looking for people who had similar injuries to what the Tsalal scientists had when their bodies were discovered. This led him to a man named Otis Heiss. He was treated for burned corneas, and there was mention of self-inflicted bites, but no explanation was ever given, and after that he disappeared. He turned to drugs, and the only way they really know that he was around is because he kept getting in trouble with the law. In the video, they noticed there were bones in the caves. They find out from the high school teacher from a couple episodes back that those are whale bones, and might even be prehistoric, which for a quick aside sounds Sedna adjacent at the very least. I discussed the Sedna myth in my last video and pointed out how Issa López seemed to confirm on social media that they were at least thinking about that when they wrote the story. And this week they went into some detail about the myth on the official podcast. And one thing they pointed out that I didn't pick up on in my research was that Inupiaq women would get lines tattooed on their fingers in honor of Sedna. And I noticed them on the laundromat grandma in the cooking scene in this episode. But there are ice caves nearby, but they've been closed off, so if they want to visit them, they'll need an expert guide. Who better than the man who mapped out the cave system, who Google tells them is the same Otis Heiss who's been off the grid after getting Tsalal. Something that Liz noticed after obsessing over the videos was that the power goes out. It's an open question why there was a generator in the ice cave in the first place. But this detail leads them back to Oliver Tagaq, who drunken Danvers thinks was defensive and hostile when they went to pay him a visit. He does have access to an emergency generator, but I thought he was sincerely upset to hear about his co-workers' deaths, so I don't know. He did leave right after they came to talk to him, and maybe more interestingly, he left a piece of cardboard and a rock that both had the spiral on them on the floor of his hut. It looks like he cut out in a hurry, which makes me wonder if the spiral was for protection. But then it's kind of weird that he left it out in the open like that if he was worried the police were going to come back. I'm getting mixed signals all around from Oliver that lead me to think that he's not a prime suspect, but will have some important information for the case before all is said and done. The spiral rock also disappeared, or Navarro just left it at Kavak's, while she was distracted with his fixing her broken finger, or something like that. I couldn't tell exactly what he did there, other than it was painful and necessary for her to heal. I think this makes him seem a little more suspicious. His non-reaction to the rock reminded me of Blair's at the crab factory when she was shown the symbol, and her missing fingers might connect her to the handprint on one of the shoes that showed up in the same episode. So it's possible that Kavak recognized the spiral and put the rock somewhere Eve would forget it. It's a small town mystery, so everyone should be a potential suspect. I mentioned that we got more insight into what happens between Navarro's ears, and we also saw some hints toward a different side of Liz. It was interesting to see her show how much she cared for Leah when she was asleep, and how concerned she was when she found Julia losing her mind on the street. We've never seen anything close to that amount of warmth when Leah's awake, and the way she dealt with Navarro's sister was night and day with how she dealt with the drunk driver in the first episode. She also did a quick pivot from the dead are gone, and we're here alone to acknowledge that Navarro saw something when they were in that room with Wheeler. We see a flashback that looks like she saw his 18-year-old victim, but then at the same time, Eve denies that she saw anything. This is clearly a ghost, so the non-believing Liz is on to something, but what that means is still up in the air. On the one hand, you have what's on screen, a murder victim that only Navarro can see appearing after her death pointing, and on the other, you have the creators of the show saying it's supposed to be open for interpretation on whether any of the supernatural stuff is actually happening. This and Julia's appearance later, an event that leaves Evangeline shell-shocked with blood coming out of her ear, seems pretty straightforward. She's seeing ghosts. She even makes the connection to the vision she had of Holden in the last episode when she sees the stuffed polar bear. So at this point, it doesn't seem that open for interpretation, but I guess we'll see how the next two episodes play out. I would also put Captain Connolly in the suspicious column. Not that I think that he might have been involved in what happened at Tsalal or Annie's murder, but Liz was pretty surprised that he showed up. All the reasons he says he's there seem legit, but there are a couple of little things that jumped out at me and made me wonder. And as I said earlier, you don't hire Christopher Eccleston to play a small role, do you? As far as suspicious activity, he perks up when she says she's treating Tsalal as a murder case. And when Liz asks him if he watched the video, he quickly says, let's keep that on a need-to-know basis. There was also a weird bit where he watered the dying plant in her office, and he smelled the water bottle first, which I'm not sure what that means, but it stood out as something that we're supposed to see. And that made me pay attention to everything else he was doing after that. He also mentions the protest. That brings the mine into things. And Leah's act of civil disobedience brought Kate McKittrick back into the mix. At the very least, I could see Connolly being more receptive to the mine's concerns than Liz is. If it came down to it, I think he would take their side. He's much more of a politician. We don't know much about Kate besides that Danvers slept with her husband, but she is the face of the mine as far as the story is concerned, which means that she'll likely take a more prominent role in the final two episodes. Leah's stunt wasn't very well thought out, but there was some truth in the message she was trying to send. The mine is polluting the water and it's killing people. Does that mean they sent someone to kill a protester and leave her body in a place that would scare the locals? It's a bit of a stretch, we'll have to wait and see, but in true detective terms, it wouldn't be surprising to find out a powerful institution was up to no good. Out in the margins, Rose's appearance felt a little out of place. Don't get me wrong, it was good to see her, but in an episode that was moving through huge emotional events at a breakneck speed, it just felt a little out of place. I guess it's there to show that Evangeline has some connections left now that Julia's gone, and she knows how to do Christmas in style, so I guess it also made for one good thing to happen on an otherwise completely bleak day. We also saw that Pete's inability to say no to his boss ruined what was shaping up to be a nice family holiday at the Pryor household. I was a little surprised that he went straight to saying, "Why don't you just admit that I ruined your life and you didn't want the baby?" But I guess we're supposed to take that as things were worse than what we'd seen so far. Which, not to beat a dead horse, but in a longer season, they probably could have done a better job of setting that up. Things wrap up at the trawler. Danvers and Navarro think they're chasing down Raymond Clark, but it turns out to be Otis, and then he does the thing where he says the name of the show. Really though, I'm not sure what to make of this guy yet. He just got introduced and became a major player in the span of one episode. I will say that he doesn't look like he's doing great, and that his pile of gear indicates that he has a healthy drug habit to deal with. I guess that is related to whatever he experienced out there, and it feels like it's a far distance from being the person who mapped these caves. Similar to Oliver, he seems like someone who might know something that will help them out, but is otherwise not really a viable suspect. Finding him wearing the pink parka puts them a step closer to tracking down Clark, which is something, and Evangeline seeing Julia while they were chasing after him is something else. So overall, this was kind of a mixed episode with some highs and some lows. I thought the music was pretty distracting and just bad in parts of this episode. But the performances continue to be good across the board. Both of the leads had a lot to do in this episode because everything was happening so quickly, and they handled it about as good as you could expect them to. The character stuff is mostly working when it comes to them, with the core characters, but then it sort of diminishes after you get out there to the Pete and Kayla's, and especially the Julia of it all. It felt like there was the beginning of something there, and it was really heavy material, but in the end, we didn't really know her, and everything that happened was just more about Evangeline. This episode was described as a detour to fill in some of the characters' stories, and next week we're supposed to return to the case. So that's good to hear because there isn't a lot of time left with only 2 episodes to go. And now that the corpsicle's gone, we're entering a new phase of the investigation. Will everyone be able to come together? Because being alone in Ennis does not seem to be where it's at. And I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.